Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into Gen Z. My guest today is Mark Beal. He is the author of Decoding Gen Z, and welcome to the show.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the third time back, and your third book. So just to give a sense to everyone, go back, Rutgers University. Sure. Just give a little background on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent, I graduated from Rutgers University in 1989, and I spent 25 plus years in marketing, public relations, working with leading brands who were using, major sports and entertainment events to market and engage consumers, Super Bowl, Olympic Games. And in 2013, Rutgers asked if I would come back, specifically the Rutgers School of Communication and Information asked if I'd come back and teach a public relations course. They were putting more emphasis on courses in public relations for their communication majors. And I said, absolutely. And one course turned to two, and two turned to three. And just this past year, September 1, 2019, they appointed me a full-time professor of practice in public relations, which basically means that I'm someone who doesn't have a PhD, but I'm coming from 25 plus years working in the industry. Sure. As a career. And so they like that idea of that experience, my contacts, my networks, my relationships, to bring that to Rutgers now as they look to, again, put more emphasis on things like public relations and marketing for their students who are majoring in communication.
So now, just a sense on the class itself. What are the kids getting out of your class when they join it?
Great question. So I teach 300, 400 level and graduate courses in either public relations and marketing, or integrated public marketing. So they're getting a few things. One, they're getting what I start every class the same way. I call it real-time, real-world marketing. And so whatever's happened in the past 24, 48 hours in public relations and marketing, this week is a good example, brands in the Super Bowl, what are they doing around the Super Bowl? And so we start the class off that way because I want them to understand what's happening today, what happened yesterday in marketing, whether that's brands, corporations, organizations, individuals. So we start every class that way, every single class, and it really becomes a chance to engage and discuss and have a conversation about it. Then the next thing we do is, we go into, again, what's happening in the real world, case studies, campaigns. I like to bring in a lot of guest speakers from brands, organizations, professional sports leagues, associations, because I think it's a great chance for students, one, to expand their network, but two, to listen to someone other than me, who's got 20, 25 years in marketing, public relations, advertising, and to really listen to their stories, their successes, their case studies. So great opportunity for what I call, and what Gen Z is looking for, I call experiential learning. So it's maybe less learning from a textbook that's been printed a year or two or three or 4 or 5 years ago, and more learning from doing, or learning from hands-on, delving into what's happening right now and why is it happening, and is it successful? Is it working? Is it not working? Is it disruptive? We probably spent last semester in all my courses almost every week talking about the Popeyes chicken sandwich. One, because it was in the news, it was disruptive, it was creating news and buzz, but the students wanted to talk about it. They wanted to understand, why was it so successful? Why was media covering it? Why were people on social media talking about it? So that's an example where, that's not in a textbook, because that's happening, during the fall semester as I'm teaching those courses.
Now, do they get like project work that they do?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the project that they probably all love, in fact, this weekend I spent time securing these clients, is for a 400 level course called Media Marketing and Communication. I bring in real world clients, so CEOs and CMOs of not necessarily corporations, but in this state it would be companies like Rook Coffee, which is very well known at the Jersey Shore, or a brand also located in Monmouth County called Jones Bar, which is an energy bar company. So they're getting to meet firsthand and sit with the CMO and CEO. But more importantly, they then have 4 to 5 weeks to create an integrated marketing campaign, which they then present at the end of the semester to me and also that client if they're able to make it back. So the students just like that idea of, I'm actually meeting with a real company, I'm sitting down with the CEO or CMO of that company, and then I'm given the chance to actually create recommendations that potentially that company might actually use, potentially.
That's
so
fantastic.
they just, the students just like that. Again, it goes back to that again, real world, real time, experiential learning.
Interesting. So let's get into the book. Decoding Gen Z is very different than the first two books. How did you get to this point of making this book.
It's interesting. It is different, but what's interesting, the first book, 101 Lessons They Never Taught You in College, was for college students who were preparing for transition to a career.
Right.
The second book, 101 Lessons They Never Taught You in High School about going to college, was for high school seniors preparing to go to college. And this is called Decoding Gen Z, 101 Lessons Generation Z will teach corporate America marketers and media. The one common theme is actually it's all about Gen Z because, again, high school students, college students are all Generation Z. So I'll take a step back. Generation Z, for those that don't know, officially, according to Pew Research, is anyone born between 1997 and approximately 2010, officially. So your oldest Gen Zers, 22, 23, graduated college in 2019 or 2018. They're in the workforce now. I say officially because unofficially I kind of round it off and say 95 to 2010, that 15-year window. But either way, the oldest just graduated, first job out of school, right? So they just went through that process of interviewing and networking and all those things. You've got a bunch of Gen Zers in college, quite a few in high school, and then of course elementary school. So that's who Gen Z is. And the reason that I came up with this idea about a year and a half ago for the book, two reasons. One, I get to spend every single day with Gen Zers. When I leave here, I'm going to Rutgers to teach a course in marketing where I get to collaborate with 35 Gen Zers. I teach them about marketing. They teach me about what's trending on social media, how they like to consume content. They don't read newspapers, but they do consume a lot of content in other ways.
Sure.
That to me is fascinating. And it's fascinating for the second reason is I spent 25 plus years in marketing and public relations. If you're a marketer today of just about any kind of brand, organization, or even a university, you need to understand this generation now for the next 15 years because they just in 2019 became the largest consumer segment in the world and of course in the United States. So there's more Gen Zers in the United States than millennials, than Gen X, than boomers, than anything else. They also have an influence on how money is spent. Now, many of them are influencing mom and dad, but they have influence. So again, if you're a marketer and if this generation is not watching the 6 o'clock news, which they're not. If they're not reading the newspaper, which they're not. If they're not consuming media the way previous generations did, then you need to figure out how do they consume? How do they want to be marketed to? How do they want to be engaged? And so it was those two things that came together, the idea that I'm spending all my time with Gen Z, but also I knew that as a marketer for the past 10, 12 years, we really focused on millennials. And not that millennials are going anywhere, but I knew that come 2020, Generation Z would be the primary focus and will be for the next 10 to 15 years. And I thought, let's interview all these Gen Zers and find out what makes them tick.
So the book is all about interviewing these Gen Zers, right?
Yeah.
And just collaborating to give you the 101 lessons.
That's it. I mean, I interviewed Gen Zers from age 13 to 23, so from high school freshmen to those who just graduated college. It's a pretty big swath, right?
Yeah.
And I'm interviewing them everything about, as I said earlier, how do you consume content? Do you watch videos? Do you seek news and information? If so, where?
Right.
So what kind of content? What kind of channels? Then we get a little bit more into what is their feeling towards brands and marketing. How do you want to be marketed to? They don't respond to traditional television commercials or advertising.
Yeah.
And then for the older Gen Zers, we talked about the workplace. Either what do you expect in the workplace? What kind of culture are you seeking? Or for college students, as you think about the workplace and future employers, what are you seeking? And this generation is the most diverse ever. And so it may not come as a surprise, but I just finished a national survey of Gen Zers, another national survey. I try to do one every 3 months. And above even competitive salaries, above benefits, the number one thing Gen Zers just told me, close to 40% said the number one thing I'm looking for is a culture of diversity and inclusion, where I can feel included and they value diverse opinions more than anything else. And that's, again, based on this being the most diverse generation ever.
Well, I like the beginning of the book where you give the glossary. That's like the
There's
key.
a story behind that.
the key. And I mean, just a couple of them that brought to my attention was bougie and extreme ghosting.
Yeah, well, I'll explain both, but first let me explain. So I'm conducting these interviews by phone, in person. Again, Gen Zers, age 13 to 23, from Connecticut to California, so all over the country. And as I had conducted the first and second interviews, the third interview, I'm on the phone. Gen Zer in Mississippi, in California, in Chicago. And they're throwing out these terms, and I have to stop and say, explain what that means to me. And slow down. And so after the first two or three, I started every interview then with, hey, I'm now creating this glossary, this dictionary of terms. Give me a few more. And of course, they rattled them right off, 2 or 3 terms. So it was interesting. So that's that glossary of Gen Z terms. They do have their own lexicon. They do have their own language. Typically, when I go out and speak to a large audience, the first thing I say is, today I'm going to spill the tea on what Gen Z thinks is dope, so that we can all be woke. And what that means basically is I'm gonna give you the inside scoop on what Gen Z thinks is cool, hot, trending, so that we can all be aware as we go ahead into whatever we do.
And you use some of the glossary.
And I use some of the glossary terms. So the Gen Zers get a kick out of it. They think it's interesting. Before I published the book, I made sure at least another 5 or 10 Gen Zers proofread that section specifically, because even though I'm asking for them to translate, I still might have gotten the definition wrong. So I go back and say, hey, can you read this just one more time? And of course, there were a few that, no, it's not exactly that. Let me explain to you what it is.
Sure.
So we had a lot of fun with that. And for the next book, we're actually writing the next book now called Engaging Gen Z, which is about, how do you engage them, whether at work, marketing.
So you'll be back again.
We'll be back again. And for that one, we're adding the glossary plus more terms that have come about since.
Great, that's fantastic. So bougie and extreme ghosting.
Extreme ghosting. I'll start with extreme ghosting. Some people have probably heard of ghosting. You send a text to someone or send a direct message and you don't hear from them, right? Well, this is where you don't hear from them at all. They just drop off and they don't respond. So you're texting, messaging, maybe sending a message in some other form or fashion. They're just not responding to you. They've just left you. They're not. And so where I see the greatest frustration there, separate from maybe social, because I don't get too much in social, is when a student is applying for an internship or a job and they've gone for the interview and haven't heard back, haven't heard anything. I've sent them an email, I've sent them a text. When will I hear? That's when it gets frustrating. When a potential employer or an internship doesn't respond, even after you've gone through the process of conducting an interview, traveling into their offices, and now you're not getting. And again, that's just not professional on the employer side, right?
Yeah.
You can easily just say, we went with another candidate.
Right.
So I think that's where that kind of thing is. Bougie's just kind of upscale. Someone enjoys, upscale things. But there's probably 5 pages in there, and they're fun. All of them are kind of G-rated. There's nothing, and I made sure we kept it that way.
So do you find a lot of the workforce people come up to you and say, hey, I'm not getting any responses from any of the employees I've sent resumes to or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, and that goes to more kind of, as another area that I focus on, which is careers and things like that. And what's happened is so many more companies, even smaller companies, are using, applicant tracking systems and more automated systems.
Yeah.
So for many college students, they're hitting the button, submitting the resume, but they really don't know where it's going, who's receiving it, is anyone looking at it? And so there's a little bit of frustration there. So I always counter that with, that's only one half of what you need to do. You need to counter that with what I call HI, human interaction. You need to find out someone who knows someone who knows someone at that same organization and see if they can at least make a call on your behalf to someone there and say, hey, I've got this great student from Rutgers. They just applied for an internship at your organization. I've got their resume. Any chance you could just give them a chance, bring them in, interview them, just consider them. I think they'd be a strong candidate. That's kind of what I call the 1-2 punch. If you just rely on submitting it and hope that someone calls you back and brings you an interview,
nothing.
Usually you don't hear nothing. So it's usually that personal connection, that personal reference will increase your chances dramatically. And that's not just for Gen Zers, that's for all of us.
Yeah. And then you find all the social medias are working for those type of people as well, the LinkedIns and Facebooks. And
and I in this book and a career book that we just recently authored, social media, there's a pro and there's a con, right? The pro is those channels can serve as, places and forums and channels where you can create content, produce content. What I talk about is like thought leadership content. So if you really want to get into fashion, maybe fashion marketing, well, you should every day be either sharing stories, posting stories, writing blogs. It can be powerful because then when that employer looks at maybe your Twitter handle or your LinkedIn pages, wow, look at this student. They're writing pieces about marketing and fashion or fashion trends or fashion. But on the flip side, those same channels, which you probably are using socially, well, they're going to look at those too. And so if they're seeing things on there that don't align with their values or the kind of behavior they're looking for, it could become a negative where, you know what, we liked you, but we went on your channels and there were some things on there that just didn't align with us. So again, whether you're a Gen Zer or older, I think you have to look at those channels as at least the way I look at them, is ways to share content that's positive, that is something others would be interested in, and that kind of supports where it is or what you want to do. So a lot of my content is around marketing and brands and sponsorships, just because that's what I like to do, and I share that kind of information.
So now, a couple of lessons. One lesson, make your products and places Instagrammable.
Yes, so that's probably more of a marketing lesson. When I survey Gen Zers across the country, and I ask them, what are the most effective ways brands can market to you and engage you? And low on that list will be traditional advertising, television commercials, things like that. High on this list will be create an experience, or an event, or a pop-up that gives me something I can shoot video photos and share on so give me an Instagrammable experience. That's what it's all about. Yeah. So that's why you see more and more brands are creating pop-up shops or events or unique experiences where someone, a Gen Zer, can go in there with friends and they can experience it, they can immerse themselves in it, they can share that. So you accomplish two things that way. One is you're getting them to participate, which is great. Now, all of a sudden, on their own, without being paid, they're serving as influencers and advocates for your brand. You're not paying them $1, but yet they're telling their friends, I had this great experience today at this pop-up shop sponsored by Target, or whatever it might be. That's the kind of thing they're looking for, because they want to, for lack of a better word, kind of get bragging rights on social media. They want to say, hey, I did something pretty cool today and I'm sharing it with my followers.
So would that be considered like a grassroots type of an event? Or?
It could be, yeah. It could be a grassroots. Now, it could be something that you travel around to different cities. Where it's really picked up in the last year or two is media companies. So a media company like Refinery 29, which is kind of a newer media company. It's not one of the traditional media companies. They created something called 29 Rooms. And it's just this interactive experience where you can walk in and literally go into these 29 rooms, but in each room there's something interesting, different, visual. Oh. And so all of a sudden brands were sponsoring that. So a brand like a MasterCard is sponsoring this experience. Well, then brands said, well, why don't we create the experience? So good example last year, which got a lot of play, both social media and editorial media, Taco Bell took over a hotel and created the Taco Bell Hotel for about a week in Palm Springs, California.
Oh, yeah, I heard of that.
It's not cheap, right? I mean, there's a lot there. But they created an experience. They invited Gen Zers to come out and experience. They invited social media influencers to shoot it, photograph it, all those kinds of things. Now, could they replicate that in other cities? Of course they could. It really comes down to budget. But that was such a unique experience put on by a brand that it not just created social media buzz and content, but major media were covering this, talking about this is unique, this is different. And the whole idea is give consumers the chance to immerse themselves in your brand more than just going to the store and ordering taco, but they're experiencing the brand in a whole different way. A Taco Bell hotel, you're talking about Taco Bell pajamas and slippers and everything else.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's where things are going. So I always tell my friends who are in event marketing that I think we're going to hit the golden age right now of event marketing. If you own an event marketing agency or an event management marketing company,
that's the place to be.
I just think for the next 10, 15 years, more and more brands, more and more companies will want to create these unique events.
Yeah. So now, another lesson that you give in the book, they want to see the project through completely.
Yeah, so it's the idea here that, when I got out of college, way back when in 1989, you went to work and you kind of were told what to do and you did it, and at the end of the day you said, I did this, and that was it. You didn't ask questions, They're really looking to be, as they say, I'd love to have a mentor and not a manager. I'd love to collaborate. I'd love to be, if you're going to invite me to be part of this process, I'm all in, but I'd love to be part of it, not just as, doing tasks, but truly collaborating, truly participating and contributing to the process. So it's just that idea that they really want to immerse themselves and be invested in this and not just take tasks, finish them, and and then take on the next task.
Right, because a lot of times with interns or entry-level type people, they usually start out with that project at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And then by the end, they don't need them anymore, so then it's usually just the manager or whoever is taking over.
Yeah. And I tell students all the time, whether it's an internship or a new job after they graduate, at the beginning it's going to be very slow, that first week or two. Just just do anything you can. Raise your hand if you can. Can I do research? Because one, they've got this new person here. What do we do with this new person?
Right.
But once you get in there, once you show up day after day for a week, they'll eventually figure out, okay, let's bring this person into the fold. But it doesn't happen day one typically.
Yeah.
So I always warn my students that that first week may be a little quiet on the internship, but don't get frustrated. Eventually, they'll figure out that you're a valuable asset and you can deliver some great value.
So another lesson, let's do lunch.
Yeah, this goes back to, I think, the point of what I called HI, human interaction. It's real easy, especially for Gen Zers, and I tell Gen Zers this all the time, so I'm not saying anything out of school here. It's real easy for a Gen Zer to go to work, go in a cube, even have earbuds in their ear, and just be working on their work, whatever that work is. Well, and then next thing you know, it's 5, 6 o'clock, and I left. Well, that's fine. I mean, you're doing your work, but you really want to break out of that. You really want to introduce yourself. You want to, as I say, maybe even shock a few people and stop in someone's office. Hey, could we grab a cup of coffee? I'd love to pick your brain. You were in my position 5 years ago. What advice would you give me?
Yeah.
It would surprise people if you had a 20, 21, 22 who was, again, has that balance where they're actually, again, using human interaction to build relationships, create relationships, ask to have lunch or a cup of coffee in a good way. Like, wow.
Yeah, and you learn about people.
And you also learn about, so it's just that idea of don't get stuck in the routine of get into work, do my work, never leave my office or my cube, and then go home.
So this is big for the Gen Z. YouTube is the epicenter of their generation, right?
Oh, I tell you, a few days ago, I had the privilege of speaking with and collaborating with 35 ninth graders. Now, typically, when I present, I'm presenting to senior executives about Gen Z. I travel around the country, whether it's the American Marketing Association or the Association of National Advertisers, and they have me meet with corporations and brands. Other than my students, it's rare that I'm meeting with and presenting to other Gen Zers. So this was an interesting one. 35 ninth graders, fascinating students, incredibly intelligent, building robots and starting their own companies. One of the students in the class was telling me how he, in sixth grade, started his first company. He started a greeting card company. He went door to door to local shops and stores in his town, and he got them to take the greeting cards and put them on the shelves. And then every Saturday he went to the store and he'd sit there, and as consumers picked a card, he'd survey, why did you pick that card over this card? I said, brilliant, just brilliant. But I always like to survey when I have a chance to have students like that, whether it's in my own class or in high school. I always survey them for the first 5 minutes. I go through social media and other things. 100% of these ninth graders, with college students it's about 92, 93%, turn to YouTube every day, at least a few times a week, for video content. So again, they're not turning to a traditional television outlet.
Sure.
And what are they doing? Yeah, there's some fun stuff, music and movies, but really it's how-to videos, tutorial videos. Yeah. How do you solve this thing? How do you build this, write this, do this? YouTube is a powerful destination. It is the most sought after or the most viewed channel of any kind for Gen Zers. Following that, 88%, 87% will say Netflix. Now that's more entertainment,
right.
Documentaries. Right. But YouTube, it's really that idea of I can go there and actually learn how to accomplish this task, whatever this task is, or build this, or whatever it might be.
And are the marketers, the brand names, are they going on to YouTube and soliciting that?
Well, that's my recommendation. So there's two ways a brand, probably more than two ways, but there's at least two ways a brand can do it. One is you can create traditional pre-roll, right? So before any video comes on, you always have that ad, we'll call it, and you can always skip that ad, 5 seconds in or 10 seconds in. Well, that's still coming off as a traditional ad.
Right.
What I recommend to marketers, depending on the brand or service or product, if they're so interested in YouTube and so interested in how-to and tutorials, well, why don't create original content around your products or services, but do it in a way that's relevant to this audience? So whatever
so it's part of the show.
So it's part, So it's part of this, and I always say, and keep it short. So it's, again, it could be whether you call them DIY videos, do-it-yourself videos, or tutorials or how-tos, but it's part of it. It's relevant. It's the brand's there, but it's not a brand commercial.
Yeah.
And so I think more and more brands are seeing that, understanding, and recognize that. I'm also seeing the same thing on the audio side. Podcasts, believe it or not, around 50% of Gen Zers, which may sound, like, wow. say they download regularly podcasts and listen to podcasts. They do it for two reasons, but I think there's a brand opportunity. One is similar to YouTube, I guess. There's just a wide variety of content: sports, comedy, music, history, politics. But the other thing is, what's really important with this generation is I can download it and listen anywhere, anytime. It can be on the bus to New York, on the train to New York, across campus as I'm walking. So it's that idea which they love. Yeah. But I think more and more brands, and we're seeing it, McDonald's is just one example, are creating their own podcasts. Now again, it's not traditional advertising, but it may be, in their case, maybe it's podcasts about food or, I don't know, travel or whatever it might be. So more and more brands are doing that as a way to get to Generation Z.
So we're coming to the end of the show,
Sure.
And you've been on 3 times, so you know the rules here, right?
Yes.
It basically, what I always ask my guests is, what advice you want to give to the parents and the kids that are watching. What advice would you like to give them?
Well, recently, as it relates to Gen Z, the Chronicle of Higher Education just came out with a pretty extensive report about this generation, because again, they are unlike millennials and Gen X and boomers, right? And it was really about Gen Z going into college, which is what the show is all about, and preparing for college. And I think the advice to we'll call it the administrators, the professors, the faculty, but it really comes out of this generation is, they are different. They're seeking a different experience. They are consuming what universities are putting out differently. They're going to your Instagram channel to see how you're marketing your university, what you're offering. So I guess the advice for Gen Zers and their parents, because usually I'm giving the advice to the organizations, the companies, sure, is keep pursuing it that way. The way you're consuming content, what you're seeking, what you're looking for. Every time I speak to Gen Zers, I always say 3 things, and I think this applies to even this question, right? Pursue your passions. You love fashion, you love music, you love healthcare. Well, find a university that you can immerse yourself in that passion. 2, I always say dream big dreams. Truly, dream. Don't let anyone say you can't, you won't. And last, anything truly is possible. You can achieve anything. And I think that phase between high school and college and going to college, this is where we should be really exploring those passions, dreaming those dreams, and pursuing all those things that truly are possible.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.